If you're only running branded search and remarketing on Google, you're pretty much fighting over the same 1,000 people while ignoring the 50,000 other people actively searching for what you sell every month. So, in this video, I want to tell you why most brands only tap into about 20% of their Google Ads potential and really the exact strategy that we use to tap into the other 80%. At the end of the day, Google is not just branded search, bottom of funnel, PMAX retargeting. And I think that's a lot of what is pushed because it's the lowest hanging fruit, is the easiest thing to get conversions on. But what genuinely takes skill is the ability to scale upwards in an account, which campaigns use which campaigns are for which function, which part of the funnel. And that's something I really want to break down in today's video. As you can see here, what I'm mentioning is you can target searchers that are actually interested in the type of product you sell, because think of yourself searching for something on Google. You're already in the market to sell typically. I'll explain some other caveats and strategies that you can use aside from that, because that's where people don't know. Google is also, you have YouTube, you have top of funnel search. So something I want to mention as well, but let's dive into it. That's really the wrongs and rights. So number one is laying down the foundation. And this builds off of really just what I've seen in auditing accounts in terms of the structure. What I see is most incorrectly set up. So the number one thing is you want to have a proper setup. I'd say 90% of the ability to scale and see success with Google Ads is having a proper foundation and setup. So what does that actually mean, and what does that entail? So number one thing I mentioned here was you want to track relevant conversions accurately. Think of any way that somebody is going to interact with your business, which leads to an actual purchase, be it a direct purchase, so someone buys on your site, be it a phone call, which maybe you have a salesperson over the phone, they handle that, and then the person transacts that way over the phone or purchases afterwards, or form submissions. If people are actually curious about a product and don't want to give a phone call, or you don't take phone calls for whatever reason, you want to track all three of these. Why? Because you want to give Google as many data points as possible about how people interact with you. And more importantly, you want to have your bidding strategy aligned towards the objectives that you have. So what you might see is people might not directly purchase and your actual in-platform ROAS is low, but you're getting a lot of phone calls. And those phone calls are leading to sales, which is growing your business. So at the end of the day, just what you see in the platform isn't enough, but eventually, you can just bid to get more of those phone calls and go after those quality type of engagements. So that's what you want to be conscious of if you're not just direct to purchase. Even if you're direct to purchase, I would say set up phone calls and form submissions as well. Super useful conversions to have, and you never know where you'll go in the future. Number two is separating your branded and non-branded traffic. And while I explain this, I want you to also reference the screenshot that I have here. Everything is super clear. Everything plays a specific purpose. What I will say, just so you understand, is best-selling brands is not their actual brand. It's brands that they resell, and this is their actual brand that we're bidding on. So again, everything plays a very vital role here. And what I want to mention is the largest part of the budget is going to non-branded campaigns focused on new customer acquisition, and also low-hanging fruit, right? Because we don't have a crazy budget. We're at around 10 to 12,000 per month. So we want to be super focused on what we're targeting. And then gradually we can expand outwards, as I'll show you in the other examples. But yeah, 80% or so, I think, 80% of the budget going to non-branded campaigns. Brand is excluded, as a negative keyword. And then bonus and performance max, we added a brand exclusion here. And then the other two campaigns that, again, I wasn't trying to pretty much shit on brand search or remarketing. It has its role, but I want you to understand that there's more to Google than just that. So brand search, we have a low budget here because not that many competitors bidding, and our CPCs are dirt cheap. Like you see, our cost per conversion is 192. We're spending like 15 cents per click. So just making sure the visibility is there. And then remarketing, super small display remarketing campaign. Nothing crazy, not a lot of budget, like $10 per day, but just allows us to remarket to people that already saw the products through the shopping ads, didn't convert on the first session. And then when they're browsing on different websites, we show the products again, just to remind them that they left it in cart. So super, super low hanging fruit. And what I would say as well is make sure that the audience you target in here is cart abandoners. If your audience size is not large enough, then you can do all users, but this is typically the most lucrative because these people were so close to actually purchasing from you, and maybe they didn't due to some limitation or they just forgot. That's the breakdown in terms of structure. Super, super simple. And then that flows into the fact that you only want to segment when there is reason to do so. The way that Google Ads is functioning now in 2026, and honestly for the past year and a half or so, is the more data you give it, the better it performs. So when you start to segment out your campaigns and start to have separate bidding strategies for each campaign, all of a sudden all your data inputs to Google are more widespread. It takes longer for it to learn because it's not leveraging the data in one single bidding strategy, rather than you have it in five. And you're not going to be able to grow because as soon as you try to increase one campaign, the other might lag, and then this one lags, and then you just have a little bit of a mess. It's hard to manage. So the key is only segment or establish new campaigns when you genuinely have a purpose for doing so, or you want to test something out, or for performance opportunities if something's not getting enough attention. Which brings me to kind of my next point, the optimization. Everybody also talks about optimization, but there's really four, I would say, or three most important things that you need to keep in mind. Again, I'm making this super, super simple. Most important, these are the 80% of what you need to do to see success. Number one is add negative keywords. Keep in mind with everything to do with shopping, you don't have any keywords. In Performance Max, the feed only, you have search themes, but the way that you are identifying who you want to go after is by adding negative keywords, right? Because you've excluded everybody else who is not relevant. So all that's left for Google is to actually target who is relevant to your product and services, just your products. And you can see here, I just added a screenshot. The way we do this is through exclusion lists. We have different exclusion lists for different purposes. And obviously you want to make sure that these are added and applied to the campaigns. Reason you see so many campaigns is an older account, much more mature, had paused campaigns. So we applied to everything, or it was applied to everything from before. But principle I want to leave you with is make sure you have an exclusion list. You can call it negative keywords, and then make sure you are excluding. The principle that I would think about when you're using match types is if it's a one word query, I would exclude it on broad match, so a competitor term. So like product competitor, exclude the competitor on broad. If it's 2 to 3 phrases you need to add, so like Home Depot, I would add that on phrase. And then anything longer, if it's like an exact query you need to exclude, put it on exact match. So that's the principle that I would keep it super, super simple. The other thing to keep in mind, negative keywords don't function with the same logic that actual keywords do, in the sense that broad match keywords will also match to the intent of the search, not just the actual keyword that you put in. But that doesn't work in reverse logic for negative keywords. So it's just something to keep in mind on that front. And then the next things I want to butt into as well is testing new products and testing new ad groups and keywords. Really, these are the same thing. It's just because you're in different networks. So as you saw before, we have the branded, or not branded, we have the feed only Performance Max and then the non-branded search. So the key here is continue to test new products, new categories, and then give them obviously enough time to run. Make sure that the traffic that they actually get is clean, because if you're pausing a category and it didn't have the opportunity to actually get quality traffic, well, you didn't really actually test it properly. So you can see here what we did. This is like a search network side, but you can see here again, some of the ad groups are enabled, half of them actually are paused, half are enabled. Why? Is because we're looking at performance. How did they perform return wise? We killed them quick if they weren't doing well. If something else, was doing better, we would just give it as much budget as possible. We gave them a decent amount of clicks as well. Traffic was relevant because, again, engagement is high as well, around 100 clicks for each. But again, if something was below campaign average, pause it, move on to the next. You want to be quick to action here, but also you want to make sure that the fundamentals are right. Like I said, that the traffic was clean to begin with. Otherwise, the test isn't real. Something to keep in mind there. Continue doing that for your ad groups, and then with your product, adding custom labels for new product categories you want to dive into or test, taking out new ones, because in the shopping network on Performance Max, if you go to listing groups, you can add custom labels, and you want to make sure that these custom labels are very, very specific to certain product categories. Think of the custom labels as a mirror of what you're doing in the search campaigns, right? Because you have ad groups, you have keywords. So like, let's say you have product type 1 in ad group and its keywords. The same thing, you're using a custom label to say product type and then only the products that are actually under that product type are being pushed into that custom label. And then you have separate custom labels for those other products you want to test out. So that's really the principle, is your feed, only Performance Max, and your search campaign are continuously testing until you get to a point of profitability where, ROAS is good at a point like, okay, this is good enough. I can scale upwards. This is profitable for me. Which let's move on to tier 3, scaling upwards, is increasing your budget. What can you do to scale? And I'd say the main thing is just increasing your budget. You want to continue increasing your budget until you run out of lost impression share to budget. So make sure you go into Google Ads right now, add the impression share lost to budget. It should be LIS budget. You can add that column, and that's going to give you a percentage of how many searches you're actually missing out for within the location that you're targeting and the products that you're targeting in your keyword selection. So for search, obviously, think about it as your search impression share. Let's say you open these 3 metrics is going to be easier. Search impression share, lost impression share to rank, and lost impression share to budget. Okay, even pause this video if you have to. But search impression share, what that means is of all these searches in the market for the specific keywords you target within the locations you're targeting, how many of those searches do you actually show up for? And then the loss to rank and loss to budget are why you're losing out on impression share. So if you're seeing a higher loss to budget, keep increasing budget. I would go as much as like, not even as much, but like as carefully as 20 to 30% every few days. What you want to focus on is look at your cost, highlight the column, and then look at spend. When you increase budget, hypothetically, let's say this was reverse, or like we even look here, we just increased here. Make sure that you're hitting that baseline for a few days. You're getting conversions still, continue going up, continue going up, continue going up until you see you're not spending your budget anymore. And that's where you capped out a little bit with your existing selection of keywords and location. So that's where you can start to expand differently. You can start to add in new locations. You can start to add in broad match. The other 2 examples I gave here were leveraging 2 other campaign types, which you may not have heard of, but top of funnel search. So with this, you are pretty much targeting more so informational queries. So people that are actually in the market to use your product, for example, or find it as a solution. But what you're doing is you're bidding on these keywords, and then you're sending to them to what's called an advertorial page, which explains and subtly highlights why your product is the best solution. Talks about kind of different benefits of what your product has, why it's different from kind of other options that they could have tested, pretty much handling any type of objection somebody could have, subtly suggesting the product, and then sending them to either collection page or product page so that they can check out. Also showing reviews on that. So this is just an example, right? Somebody's looking for how to cover ugly walls. Let's say a client is a wallpaper store, or they sell wall panels, and they highlight how their wall panels are great to cover ugly walls. They're easy to install. They're removable if you're a renter. All of those different benefits that somebody would be looking for and wouldn't realize those solutions just from seeing an ad. So all of a sudden you've moved them along the funnel, made them a little bit more ready to convert. And now they see your product as a potential solution, so that, maybe they didn't convert off of this session, but then next they search X and X brand panels, for example. So that's just an idea that you want to have. And I would say, like I said, fantastic way to generate new customers, because CPCs are super low, right? These are informational queries. People don't know yet how to target these properly. So if you have a really good solution in terms of building an advertorial and targeting this type of traffic, that's where you can get away with a lower conversion rate. Obviously, they're going to convert lower rate. They're not in the market yet for your specific product, I'm saying, but you can still have profitable ROAS. So that's definitely something you want to test out. Seeing a lot of success with this, and it's really underrated. People don't talk about it. The next thing that I would talk about as well in terms of scaling is doing other creative formats. Google has done a really big push on what's called demand generation campaigns. And within those, you can segment to YouTube, Discovery, Gmail, all of Google's other networks. I would start with YouTube. And then what I would do is I would filter to YouTube Shorts only. You can choose that as the only placement. And if you're already running creatives on Meta, you have a ton of video assets there. I would use the ones that perform well, literally just copy paste, put them into here, and then start retesting some of the other ones that you had on Meta because again, this is a different platform. Audiences could respond a little bit differently, and the targeting works a little bit differently. So that's something I would keep in mind. And then what this is good for as well is like you're pretty much creating your own demand for your product, right? Because they see a YouTube short, they get curious, search up the product, and then that's really captured by your tier one search campaign, depending on product type, product, whatever they searched for. Or they'll even go ahead and search your brand. If they don't convert through brand, then they're remarketed through the display campaign, maybe from your abandoned checkout email flows as well. So all of that's to say, we're capturing people at every part of the funnel. Each campaign that I introduced or mentioned here plays a very specific role in terms of your success. If you have too many campaigns, it becomes way too difficult to scale because you just have a mess. Your bidding strategy is too segmented. Data is flowing everywhere. So when you're kind of starting out at a 10K budget and then starting to grow outwards, all the way to 100 plus, kind of like what we have here. Start with simplicity and then start to expand outwards when you see your budget is capping out and your return is going down. That's what I would keep in mind. If something's working well, keep scaling it upwards until you don't really have any more impressions you're lost to budget. And then, you can start looking outwards. Okay. Hope you found that useful. That's really the breakdown of what we're doing. If I had to dumb down my 3-step strategy or really what I'm doing to grow accounts, this would be it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'm happy to discuss. Alrighty, I'll see you in the next one.